Welcome to Creepy Corner Stories, where the shadows of the past come to life. High school is supposed to be a place of memories, laughter, and friendship, but some schools hide secrets, dark and terrifying. Tonight, we dive into the eerie tales that linger in the empty hallways, the ghostly whispers in the locker rooms, and the haunting stories told under the bleachers. These aren't just campfire tales, they're real, spine-chilling experiences shared by those who lived to tell the tale. Dim the lights, hold your breath, and prepare yourself for stories that will make you think twice about walking down that quiet hallway. Alone, let's begin. Story: The Locker Room Secret. It was the final week of senior year, and everyone at Ridgewood High was buzzing with excitement. The halls were alive with laughter, last-minute pranks, and yearbook signings. Amid the chaos, no one paid much attention to the rumors about the old gym locker room on the east wing of the school. The east wing had been abandoned for years, its doors locked after the new gym was built. Stories circulated about a student named Claire who had mysteriously vanished there during a basketball game decades ago. Most dismissed it as an urban legend, but some swore they had heard eerie noises, whispers and footsteps coming from the old locker room late at night. Melissa and her friends, curious and thrill-seeking, decided to explore the locker room after school. With the keys they borrowed from the janitor's office, they made their way to the east wing. The air grew colder as they approached, the dim light of the hallway flickering ominously. The locker room door creaked loudly as it opened, revealing a space frozen in time. Old lockers stood rusting against the walls, and dust-covered benches lined the room. The faint smell of mildew hung in the air. "See? Nothing but an old locker room," Jake said, his voice echoing. But as they moved deeper into the room, Melissa noticed something odd. One of the lockers was slightly ajar. It creaked as she pulled it open, revealing a faded photograph of a girl in a basketball uniform. Written on the back was a single word: "Help." Suddenly, the door slammed shut, plunging the room into darkness. Panic set in as they tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. A soft sobbing sound echoed from the far corner of the room. Melissa's flashlight trembled in her hand as she pointed it toward the sound. There, in the corner, was a figure. A girl with long, dark hair and hollow eyes. She was wearing an old Ridgewood High basketball uniform. "Why are you here?" the girl whispered, her voice low and trembling. Jake stammered, "We didn't mean to disturb you." "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice growing colder. The lights flickered, and suddenly the lockers began to rattle violently. The sobbing turned into a chilling scream as the figure lunged toward them. Melissa screamed, and the group frantically clawed at the door until it finally gave way. They tumbled into the hallway and ran without looking back. The next day, the group tried to tell their story, but no one believed them. The janitor claimed he had no keys to the east wing, and the principal insisted the door had been sealed for years. When Melissa checked her phone that evening, she found a new picture in her gallery, a photo of the old locker room. Standing in the middle was the girl in the basketball uniform, staring directly at the camera. From that day on, Melissa avoided the east wing, but every so often she'd hear whispers in the halls, whispers calling her name. Story: The Shadow in the Auditorium. Riverview High had always been proud of its grand old auditorium. Built in the 1920s, it was a stunning piece of architecture with towering columns, velvet curtains, and intricate carvings on the walls. But as beautiful as it was, the students whispered about a darker side to the place, a shadow that moved across the stage when no one was there, and an unsettling hum that echoed late at night. The story went that a drama teacher named Mr. Grayson had died tragically in the auditorium decades ago. Some claimed it was an accident during a rehearsal, others whispered it was something far more sinister. But everyone agreed on one thing: his spirit never left. For years, the stories were just that, stories, until the week of the annual fall play. Sophia, the stage manager, had stayed late one evening to organize props. The rest of the crew had left hours ago, leaving her alone in the vast, empty auditorium. As she worked, she thought she heard footsteps on the stage above her. "Hello? Who's there?" she called, her voice echoing in the stillness. There was no answer. Shrugging it off, she continued her work. But then came the unmistakable sound of someone whispering her name. Her heart pounded as she climbed the steps to the stage. The spotlight, which she was sure had been off, was now on, casting a single bright beam onto the center of the stage. "Very funny, guys," she called, assuming it was a prank. But when she stepped into the light, the air grew icy cold, and the whispering grew louder. She turned quickly, but there was no one there, only the faint outline of a shadow, standing just beyond the light's edge. Frozen in fear, Sophia watched as the shadow moved closer. It had no defined form, no face, just a mass of darkness that seemed to pulse and shift. "Leave," it hissed, the word reverberating through the empty space. Sophia bolted, leaving her things behind. The next day, she tried to convince herself it had been her imagination. But when she arrived to finish her work, the props were scattered across the stage, and the spotlight was once again on, as if inviting her back. That night during rehearsal, the strange occurrences continued. Lights flickered, ropes for the curtains moved on their own, and the sound system crackled with static. Then, in the middle of a scene, the lead actor screamed and pointed at the balcony. "It's him!" he shouted. "He's watching us!" Everyone turned to look, but the balcony was empty. Still, the tension was palpable, and the director decided to end rehearsal early. Sophia and a few others stayed behind to clean up. As they worked, the whispers returned, louder this time, echoing through the auditorium. The group huddled together as the temperature dropped and the lights dimmed. Then they saw it. The shadow, moving across the stage, larger and darker than before. It stopped at center stage and seemed to stare directly at them. One of the crew members whispered, "Mr. Grayson?" The shadow didn't respond, but the air grew heavy, and a single word boomed through the auditorium: "Leave." That was enough. The group fled, leaving everything behind. The play was canceled, and the auditorium was locked indefinitely. But even now, students claim they can hear whispers coming from behind the locked doors, and the shadow still roams the stage, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to return. Story: The Forgotten Locker. Crescent High was an ordinary school with ordinary students, except for Locker 3D9. Tucked away in a dimly lit hallway near the basement, Locker 329 had been left untouched for years. Teachers avoided it, custodians refused to clean near it, and students whispered about its eerie reputation. Rumor had it that a girl named Lily, a quiet and reserved student, had used that locker decades ago. After her mysterious disappearance, the locker was sealed, and no one dared to open it. One day, during a routine shuffle of locker assignments, Emily, a new student, was assigned Locker 329. She was unaware of its grim history. When she arrived at the locker, she felt a chill run down her spine. The hallway was colder than the rest of the school, and the lights flickered as she approached. Still, she shrugged it off, thinking it was just an old building. Emily tugged at the lock, and with a reluctant creak, the door swung open. Inside, the locker was completely empty, save for a small, dust-covered notebook tucked in the corner. Curious, Emily flipped through its pages. It was filled with shaky handwriting, scribbles about voices, shadows, and someone watching. The last entry read, "If you're reading this, it's too late. Don't look behind you." Emily's heart raced, but she forced herself to laugh. "Just some silly prank," she muttered, closing the locker and heading to class. That night, strange things began to happen. Her textbooks disappeared and reappeared in random places. Her phone glitched, playing static whenever she tried to call someone. And in her dreams, she saw a pale girl with hollow eyes staring at her from the shadows. The next day, Emily tried to switch lockers, but the administration insisted there were no other options. Defeated, she went back to Locker 329. This time, there was a faint metallic smell coming from inside. When she opened it, the notebook was gone, replaced by a single photo of a girl standing in the same hallway. The girl looked eerily familiar. Her pale face and hollow eyes mirrored the figure from Emily's dreams. Panicking, Emily asked her classmates about Locker 329. One of the seniors, a nervous boy named Josh, reluctantly told her the story of Lily. "They never found her body," he said, "but they say her spirit is tied to that locker. Anyone who disturbs it doesn't last long." Emily decided to confront the mystery head-on. That evening, when the school was quiet, she returned to the locker. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, she opened it once more. Inside, she found a small mirror hanging on the back wall of the locker. As she stared into it, her reflection began to distort, twisting into the pale, hollow-eyed girl. Then, the door slammed shut behind her, plunging her into darkness. No matter how hard she screamed or pounded on the door, no one came to her rescue. The next morning, locker 329 was empty again. Now, students say if you pass that hallway late at night, you might hear faint whispers or see a pale girl staring at you from the corner of your eye. Crescent High still assigns lockers, but no one dares to take 329. It remains sealed, waiting for its next victim. Story: The Vanishing Classroom. Sunny Ridge High School was a sprawling campus with an old, unused building tucked at the farthest edge. The building, known as Wing D, had been abandoned for decades after a fire broke out in the 1980s. Nobody was hurt, but the principal at the time declared it unsafe. Over the years, stories of ghostly sightings and eerie sounds began to circulate, turning Wing D into the school's favorite source of spooky tales. For years, students dared each other to enter, but few did, and even fewer admitted what they saw. Until one night, a group of seniors, Amy, Ben, Carla, and Derek, decided to investigate. It was their last year, and they wanted a story to tell at graduation. Armed with flashlights and their phones, they climbed through a broken window on a chilly Friday night. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of burnt wood and mildew. The hallways were eerily silent, except for the faint creak of their footsteps on the warped floorboards. Dust coated every surface, and cobwebs draped over broken lockers. "This place is so creepy," Carla whispered, her voice barely audible. "Relax," Derek said, trying to sound brave. "It's just an old building. Nothing's going to happen." They wandered through the deserted halls until they found themselves in front of room 104. Its door was slightly ajar, and a faint light flickered inside. "Did anyone else see that?" Amy asked, pointing to the glow. "Probably just an old light fixture," Ben suggested, though his voice wavered. Against their better judgment, they pushed the door open. The room looked untouched by time. Desks were neatly arranged, and a chalkboard at the front had the date October 12, 1984, written on it in chalk. The strangest part? The air felt warm, as if the room had been recently occupied. Suddenly, the sound of faint giggling echoed through the room. The group froze. "Who's there?" Derek called out, his voice cracking. The giggling stopped, replaced by the sound of scratching, like nails running down the chalkboard. They turned toward the sound and saw the chalk slowly moving on its own, scrawling words, "Stay and learn with us." The group bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before they could reach it. They pounded and yelled, but the room seemed to swallow their voices. The desks began to shift, dragging themselves into a circle around the group. From the corners of the room, ghostly figures of children materialized, their faces pale and eyes hollow. They whispered in unison, "Stay with us. We need more friends." Amy tried to scream, but no sound came out. Ben collapsed to his knees, shaking. Carla clutched Derek's arm, muttering prayers under her breath. The ghostly children moved closer, their whispers growing louder until they became deafening. Just as the figures reached out to touch them, the door burst open. A sudden gust of wind swept through the room, scattering the ghostly figures like smoke. The group didn't wait to see what would happen next. They sprinted out of Wing D, vowing never to return. The next day at school, they tried to tell their classmates what had happened, but no one believed them. When they tried to show proof, they realized their phones had no footage from that night, only static-filled videos with faint whispers in the background. To this day, room 104 in Wing D remains a mystery. Some say the ghostly children were the spirits of students who perished in a fire long before the official record of the building's history. Others think it's just a shared hallucination brought on by fear. But if you ever wander too close to Wing D, listen carefully. You might hear the faint sound of giggling and the scrape of chalk on a board, inviting you to stay forever. Story: The Locker That Shouldn't Open. At Willow Creek High, the lockers were ordinary, except for locker 3329. It sat at the end of the third-floor hallway, away from most classrooms, and it hadn't been assigned to a student in years. Rumor had it that decades ago, a student named Emma used locker 329. She disappeared without a trace one rainy afternoon, leaving behind only her schoolbooks and a single red ribbon tied to the locker handle. Over the years, stories grew. Students whispered that anyone who dared to open the locker would hear Emma's voice calling for help. Some even claimed they saw the ribbon flutter, even when the hallway was completely still. One Friday evening, after the school play practice ran late, 3 students, Maya, Liam, and Zoe, decided to see if the stories were true. The hallway was eerily quiet as they approached the infamous locker. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. "I bet it's just a prank," Liam said, but his shaky voice betrayed his bravado. Zoe smirked. "Only one way to find out." Maya hesitated. "What if it's true? What if—" "Come on, it's just a locker," Liam interrupted, spinning the dial of the lock. To everyone's surprise, it clicked open on the first try, even though no one knew the combination. Inside, the locker was empty, except for a tattered notebook with Emma scrawled across the cover. The air around them grew cold. Zoe picked up the notebook and flipped it open. The pages were filled with frantic scribbles. "Help me, don't leave me, she's coming." "What is this?" Zoe whispered, her hands trembling. Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered, and the sound of footsteps echoed from the far end. But when they looked, the hallway was empty. "Let's just leave," Maya pleaded. Before they could close the locker, a low, mournful voice echoed from inside. "Why did you open it?" The 3 froze as a chill swept through them. A shadowy figure began to materialize inside the locker, a girl with long, dark hair, pale skin, and hollow eyes. Her red ribbon was tied tightly around her neck, as if it had once been a noose. "You shouldn't have opened it," the girl whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally. The locker door slammed shut on its own, trapping the notebook inside. The lights went out completely, plunging the hallway into darkness. When they came back on, locker 329 was closed and locked again. The red ribbon now hung from the handle, fluttering slightly in an invisible breeze. The trio sprinted out of the building without looking back. The next day, they tried to tell their friends what happened, but no one believed them. When they checked locker 329 during school hours, it was empty, as if nothing had happened. Still, Maya, Liam, and Zoe knew the truth. And every time they passed the third-floor hallway, they felt a chill, heard faint footsteps, and avoided locker 329 at all costs. Story: The Locker Whisperer. Ridgeway High was an unassuming school, like any other. But there was one thing that set it apart: the mysterious, cursed locker. Locker 513 had been sealed for decades. Rumors swirled among students about why. A missing student, strange noises, and an incident no one dared to talk about. On a rainy October morning, the school's new janitor, Mr. Hensley, decided to clean the abandoned hallway where the locker stood. The students pleaded with him not to touch it, but he scoffed. "It's just a locker," he said. By lunchtime, the once sealed locker was wide open. Inside was nothing but an old notebook with a cracked leather cover. Word spread quickly, and soon everyone was daring the bravest student to approach the forbidden locker. Anna, a quiet sophomore who loved mysteries, couldn't resist. That evening, as the school emptied out, she made her way to locker 513. She found the notebook inside, its pages brittle and filled with eerie, scribbled notes. "Who's there?" she whispered, feeling a sudden chill. The hallway was empty, but a soft voice answered from the locker. "I've been waiting for you." Anna froze, clutching the notebook. "What? Who are you?" The voice was faint but persistent. "Help me, I'm trapped." Terrified yet intrigued, Anna flipped through the notebook. It detailed strange happenings, lights flickering, whispers in the halls, and the disappearance of a boy named Sam, last seen near locker 513 30 years ago. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. The voice haunted her. By morning, she decided to investigate further. She returned to the locker and placed her hand on its cold metal surface. "Why are you here?" she asked aloud. The voice replied, "I was taken by something dark. It won't let me go." Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered. Shadows danced across the walls, converging toward the locker. Anna stepped back, but the shadows didn't stop. They wrapped around her, pulling her closer. "Join me," the voice hissed, now filled with malice. Anna screamed as the shadows dragged her into the locker. The door slammed shut, leaving behind only the notebook. The next day, her friends searched for her, but there was no sign of Anna. Locker 513 was sealed again, as if it had never been opened. The school forbade anyone from speaking about it, but students whispered tales of a faint voice coming from the locker at night, calling for help, or calling for its next victim. Story: The Whispering Hallways. It was the first day of senior year, and a group of friends, Lily, Jake, Mia, and Sam, were walking through the school's dimly lit hallways after school had ended. They had stayed late for a project, and were now making their way to the exit. The school was eerily quiet, much quieter than it had ever been before. As they passed the old library, the one that had been closed for renovations for months, a strange whisper echoed down the hallway. "Did you hear that?" Mia asked, her voice shaky. The others looked at her, but no one had heard anything. "You're just tired," Jake said with a shrug. But as they walked further, the whisper grew louder, clearer, coming from the direction of the library. It sounded like a voice, faint and distant, but definitely human. Sam, always the curious one, decided to investigate. "Let's check it out," he suggested, his face pale but intrigued. Reluctantly, the others followed him toward the library. As they approached, they noticed something strange. There was no construction work, no signs of renovation. The library door, which had been locked for weeks, was now slightly ajar. The whispers grew louder, almost as if someone was right behind them. They stepped inside cautiously. The room was dark, save for a single flickering light near the back. As they made their way deeper into the room, the door slammed shut behind them. The sound of footsteps echoed across the floor, but no one was there. The light flickered one last time before going out completely, leaving them in complete darkness. Panic set in, and Lily felt a cold breath on her neck. "Who's there?" she cried out, but the only response was the chilling sound of whispers. Whispers that seemed to be all around them now, repeating the same thing over and over. "You should have never come back." Suddenly, the faint glow of a figure appeared at the back of the library. It was a shadowy figure, hunched over, its face obscured by the darkness. It slowly turned toward them, its eyes glowing faintly red. The group turned and ran, but no matter how fast they moved, the figure followed them. Every corner they turned seemed to lead them back to the library, and no matter how much they screamed for help, no one could hear them. The next morning, the school was back to normal, but Lily, Jake, Mia, and Sam never spoke of what happened. They couldn't explain it, but they all knew one thing for sure: the library had been abandoned for a reason, and some secrets are better left undisturbed. As the bell rang that final time, and the last students vanished from the halls, something stayed behind. It's easy to forget the darker parts of our schools, the hidden corners, the places no one dares to go, but sometimes they remember us. So the next time you're walking through those empty corridors, when the lights flicker and a shadow moves in the corner of your eye, remember, there's always more to a school than you see. And some stories are never meant to be told. Thank you for watching. See you next time.